I'm 70 and a widower. My son-in-law tried to move his parents into my house and slowly push me out of my own home. So I sold the house and disappeared. Now everyone calls me a monster. But they don't know what he was really planning. I'm writing this because my daughter is crying to everyone who will listen that I abandoned her and my grandkids. My son-in-law is telling people I'm senile and vindictive, and I'm sitting in a quiet little living room that actually belongs to me, wondering if I did the right thing. You can decide. A bit about me. My name is Thomas, 70 years old. I live, or rather lived, in a nice 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban town. My wife and I bought that place when Laura was in middle school. I worked 4 decades as an electrician, took every overtime shift I could, and we paid that mortgage off years ago. The house was in my name only. Not because I wanted to cut anyone out, but because that's how we set it up back when we bought it. My wife trusted me, and we always said, "This will be our family home. Holidays, grandkids, everything." Then 3 years ago, my wife died. Cancer. One day we were arguing about whether the hydrangeas needed more sun, and a few months later I was standing alone in that same yard at her memorial. After she passed, the house felt too big and too quiet, but it was still home. Every corner had a memory. I was lonely, yes, but I managed. I cooked simply, kept the place in order, visited the cemetery, had coffee with neighbors, called Laura every Sunday. About a year after my wife passed, Laura and her husband Eric ran into financial trouble. He'd lost a contract. They said the rent where they were was getting too high. They came to visit one Sunday, sat me down at the dining table, hands folded like kids about to confess something. "Dad," Laura said, "we were wondering if we could stay with you for a couple of years, just until we save enough for a down payment. We'd cover some of the bills." I remember feeling relieved, honestly. The idea of kids and grandkids in the house again, noise in the hallways, someone to cook for. I said yes before they finished the sentence. So they moved in, Laura, her husband Eric, and the 2 kids. At first it was good. I watched the grandkids after school and made them grilled cheese. I picked them up from soccer practice. I told myself my wife would have loved this chaos. I paid part of the grocery bill and all of the property taxes and insurance. They covered the internet, some utilities, and their own car payments. I never pressed about money. They were young, trying to get ahead. I remember how hard it was for my wife and me in our 20s. I stayed out of their marriage. If they argued, I turned up the TV or went out back to prune the roses. It was their life. I was just grateful to have family around. The first warning sign came about 6 months in. I was standing in my own kitchen, reaching for the coffee tin, and Eric walked in behind me, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Morning, Tom. Our coffee is way better than the stuff you buy, isn't it?" Our coffee. I laughed it off. People talk like that, I told myself. It's just a phrase. Then it became our living room, our yard, our garage, whenever he was on the phone with his buddies, giving them updates about the house. One evening, I came home from the hardware store and saw a stranger's truck in the driveway. I walk in and find Eric with a contractor measuring the living room wall. "What's going on?" I asked. Eric smiled like I was a kid interrupting grown-ups. "Hey, Tom, I was just having him look at taking this wall out. Open concept, more modern. Would be great for resale value down the line." "Resale?" I repeated. "What resale? I'm not selling." He laughed. "Not now, but we should be thinking ahead. This is our family home now." That word again. Our. I told him firmly at that point, "The house is mine. I appreciate you helping out and all, but any big changes need to go through me." He raised his hands like I was overreacting. "Of course, Tom. I'm just exploring options, trying to optimize the space." That was his favorite word, optimize. It sounded harmless, efficient, smart. He used it for everything. We need to optimize how we use the fridge. We should optimize the bills and put them all under one account. We should optimize the space upstairs. The optimizing always seemed to involve me losing something. A few months later, he started making comments about my age. "Tom, soon it'll be too hard for you to manage this place alone," he'd say, watching me rake leaves. "We need to organize things smarter." Or, "You shouldn't be going up and down those stairs so much. At your age, one fall and that's it. You should really think about moving your things into the downstairs room, so we can, optimize." Every time I pushed back, he'd smile and say, "Just looking out for you." One night, we were all eating dinner. The grandkids were chattering about school. I reached for the salt and my hand trembled a little. Arthritis. Nothing serious, just age. Eric's eyes locked onto that tiny shake. "See?" he said to Laura, almost triumphant. "That's what I'm talking about. What if he falls? We need a real plan." He said it like I wasn't sitting right there. I cleared my throat. "I may be old, but I'm not a child." He smiled, patronizing. "No one said you are, Tom, but it's irresponsible not to plan." Laura squeezed my hand under the table later and whispered, "He just worries a lot. Don't take it personally, Dad." I tried not to, but the pattern kept getting worse. He took over more and more of the paperwork. "I'll handle the utilities," he said. "Consolidate everything. Makes things simpler." He nagged me to let him set up online access to my homeowner's insurance so he could pay it more easily from their account. "We'll settle up later," he'd say. I refused that one. Something in my gut said no. And then came the day I found out what he was really planning. It was a Tuesday. I remember because it was trash day and I'd just dragged the cans to the curb. I came back in through the garage door and heard Eric's voice coming from the living room. The grandkids were at school. Laura was at work. I thought Eric was too. I was about to call out when I realized he was on a video call. I could hear everything. I stopped in the hallway where he couldn't see me, but I could hear his voice clearly. "Yeah, Mom, I told you. It's only a matter of time," he was saying. "The house is big. Tom won't be able to handle the whole floor soon anyway. You and Dad can move in with us. We'll give him a small room downstairs or get him into assisted living." A woman's voice, his mother, I assume, came through the speaker. "Are you sure that's fair? It's his house." Eric laughed. "He doesn't even understand half of what's going on. I've already started the process. We'll put part of the house in our names once we invest your money. Legally, he'll be stuck. He can't manage all this on his own." I felt like someone had kicked me in the chest. My house. The one I'd paid for. The one my wife had painted room by room. I stood there listening to my son-in-law discuss my future like I was a piece of furniture. He continued, "Look, you sell your place, put the money into redoing the house. New kitchen, maybe finish the basement. The lawyer says if we structure it right, you'll technically own a share of the property. If Tom gets too difficult, we'll have leverage. Worst case, we move him into a facility. It'll be for his own good." His mother hesitated. "Eric!" "Mom, relax," he said. "This is smart. Otherwise, we'll never get ahead. He's sitting on all this equity doing nothing. He doesn't need this much space." My ears were ringing. My hands went numb. I backed away quietly and went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the family photo on my dresser. That same day, later in the afternoon, Eric left his laptop open at the dining table when he went to pick up the kids. I don't snoop. I was raised that way. But something pulled me to that screen. A spreadsheet was open. At the top, in neat little capital letters, Family Home Optimization Plan. There were tabs labeled Sale of George, Helen House, Renovation Budget, Ownership Split, and Projections. My name appeared in one column. Current owner, Thomas. Future, Joint with Eric plus Eric's parents. There were notes in the cells. Move Tom to downstairs room within 12 months. Introduce idea of assisted living after 18 to 24 months. Leverage safety health concerns if he resists. I clicked into an email tab that was still open. An email thread with a lawyer. Subject line: question about adding parents to deed. I want to find a way, Eric had written, for my parents to invest proceeds from the sale of their home into our current house in exchange for putting their names on the property. The current owner is my father-in-law. He's aging, and we're helping him manage things. I want to make sure legally we're protected if his health changes. My stomach turned. There it was in black and white. They weren't just planning to live with me. They were planning to turn my home into some kind of financial hostage situation with me as the burden in the corner. I shut the laptop gently, walked to the bathroom, and splashed water on my face. I'd heard stories about old folks having their houses taken right out from under them, being shoved into nursing homes while their kids sold everything. But I never thought my own daughter's husband would be the one to try it. That night I tried to talk to Laura. We were alone in the kitchen. Eric had taken the kids to bed. "Laura," I said, keeping my voice calm, "have you and Eric been talking about changing the ownership of the house?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I overheard him on a call," I said carefully. "He was talking about his parents moving in, and I saw some emails about putting part of the house in his and his parents' names, about assisted living for me." Her face closed up the second I said emails. "You went through his computer?" she asked, her tone suddenly sharp. "I saw it open on the table," I said. "I didn't go digging. Laura, he's planning things. Big things. About my home. About my future. Without asking me." She sighed and rubbed her temples. "Dad, you're overreacting. Eric just likes to plan. That's how he is. He wants to make sure everyone's taken care of." "Taken care of," I repeated quietly. "By moving me into a facility and bringing his parents in here?" "He never said that," she snapped. "He did," I said. "I heard him." She gave me a tired, patronizing smile. "Dad, you must have misunderstood. You know sometimes you mix things up now. And anyway, it's not crazy to think about assisted living someday. You had that scare last winter with your blood pressure. Eric is just trying to be responsible." "Responsible with my house," I said, "with my life." "Dad," she said, her voice dropping into that tone people use when they think you're being childish, "Eric knows more about finances than you do. He understands how to optimize assets and protect everyone. You should trust him." That word again. Trust. I looked at my daughter, at the lines around her eyes, at the way she wouldn't quite meet my gaze. And I realized something terrible. If I stayed passive, it wouldn't be long before I was the old man in the small downstairs room while decisions were made over my head in our kitchen. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling for hours. By morning, I had made my decision. If they wanted to treat me like I was already gone, then I would show them what it looked like when I actually left. First, I needed information. I made an appointment with an attorney downtown. I didn't tell Laura or Eric. I just said I had a doctor's appointment. At my age, no one questions that. The lawyer was maybe mid-50s, gray at the temples, calm eyes. I brought my folder with the original deed, tax records, and the mortgage papers my wife and I had kept. He spread them out on his mahogany desk, adjusted his glasses, and nodded. "So," he said, "the house is entirely in your name. No liens, no co-owners, no life estate arrangements. You own it outright." "No papers I signed when my wife was in the hospital might have changed that?" I asked. "Nothing Eric had me sign for insurance updates or anything?" He shook his head. "Nothing here indicates any transfer. Did you sign anything in the last few years with an attorney present?" "No," I said. "Eric likes to do things online. He's tried to have me sign documents on his tablet, but I always refused when I didn't understand." The lawyer nodded. "Good. You did the right thing. Right now you're the only legal owner. You have full authority to sell, transfer, or do whatever you want with this property." "What if I wanted to sell it?" I asked. "Without telling my son-in-law, would that be legal?" He raised an eyebrow. "Yes. It's your house. You're under no obligation to get their permission. Of course, you'd want to think about your daughter and grandkids, but strictly from a legal standpoint, you can sell whenever you want." I sat there, absorbing the weight of that. Then I told him everything. About what I'd overheard, about the spreadsheet, about the emails, about Laura's reaction. He listened quietly, hands folded. When I finished, he said, "Unfortunately, this kind of situation is becoming more common. But you're in a better position than most. You're still mentally sharp, your name is on everything, and you came to me before signing anything under pressure." He leaned forward. "If you want to protect yourself and your grandchildren's future, you have options. You can sell. You can set up a trust. You can rewrite your will. The key is to act before they lock you into anything." I walked out of that office with a business card, a list of steps, and a strange sense of calm. Next, I called a realtor. An older woman I knew from church had a brother in real estate. He came over under the pretense of being a guy who gives free property evaluations to seniors, in case Eric was watching. We walked the property while Laura was at work, and Eric was working from home at a coffee shop downtown. "This place will sell fast," the realtor said. "Good school district, nice yard, updated kitchen. You could get a very good price, especially if you're willing to move quickly." "How quick is quick?" I asked. "A couple of weeks if we find a cash buyer," he replied. "Maybe 3 or 4 if there's a mortgage involved." I nodded. "Let's move forward, quietly." I rented a small storage unit across town and started decluttering. That's what I told them. "I'm getting rid of old junk," I said, packing up my tools, my important documents, the family heirlooms my wife left me. "No sense keeping it all." Eric loved it. "Great idea, Tom. We're going to need the space when my parents move in anyway," he joked one evening. He had no idea he was helping me. Day by day, I moved more of my real life out of that house. Anything I didn't want to lose went into the storage unit or to my brother's place in a neighboring town. At the same time, with my lawyer's help, I found a modest single-story house in a different neighborhood, closer to an old friend of mine. 2 bedrooms, small yard, nothing fancy, but solid and quiet. We arranged for me to buy it with a portion of the proceeds once my house sold. The rest would go into my accounts and a trust for the grandkids. I met with a financial advisor recommended by my lawyer. We set up an irrevocable trust for my grandchildren, with very specific rules. Eric would have no direct control or access. He couldn't borrow against it. He couldn't manage it. If Laura divorced him someday, or if something happened, the funds would still be there for the kids. If she stayed with him, he'd still never be able to touch it. That part gave me peace. All of this took a few weeks. During that time, Eric got bolder. He started referring to "when my parents get here" like it was already done. One evening, he walked into the living room with a tape measure. "I'm thinking," he said, extending the metal tape across my wall, "we can put your bed against this wall downstairs. It'll be easier for you, no more stairs." "My bed is fine where it is," I said. "That's not what your doctor would say," he replied. "You're going to fall one of these days." He said it like he was hoping for it. A couple of days after that, I caught him helping the kids with their homework at the dining table. "Grandpa's not always going to live here," he was saying. "Someday he'll move somewhere with more help. But that's okay, because then you'll have more room." The kids looked uncomfortable. My granddaughter glanced at me with big eyes. I cleared my throat, and Eric shut his mouth, but the message was clear. To him, I was temporary, an obstacle between him and an asset. The second hook of this whole mess snapped into place for me one night when I woke up at 3 a.m. and realized something simple. They were planning my future without me. I was going to plan their future without them. The sale moved faster than even the realtor expected. An older couple who'd been looking to move closer to their daughter loved the house and made an offer quickly. We negotiated a fair price. They had the financing. We set a closing date. I deliberately chose a Friday. That same week, Eric came home grinning. "Big news," he announced to the family at dinner. "My parents finally sold their place. They're going to move down here in 2 weeks. They'll drive in with a moving truck, and we'll start getting everything set up. It's really happening." Laura clapped her hands, excited. "They got more than they expected for their house," she said to me, as if I should be happy about that. "They'll be able to help with renovations here." I took a sip of water and asked, "Where will everyone sleep?" Eric waved his fork. "We'll figure it out. It'll be tight at first, but once we reorganize the rooms and get you settled downstairs, it'll be fine." The next Monday I met my lawyer again. We signed the final sale documents. The buyers wired the money. Just like that, the house no longer belonged to me. It was strange. For a moment I felt like I was betraying my wife's memory, but then I remembered the look on Eric's face when he talked about leverage and assisted living, and my guilt hardened into resolve. The new owners were kind enough to agree to let me leave a few big items in the garage for the week, as long as they were gone by Saturday. I paid a moving company to take the last pieces on Friday afternoon, and then handed the new couple their keys, wished them luck, and drove to my new house. I left a short, polite note on the kitchen counter addressed to Laura, sealed in an envelope with my new phone number and address. I knew they wouldn't see it until much later. On Wednesday, 2 days before Eric's big move-in weekend, he came home particularly cheerful. "Mom and Dad are so excited," he told Laura while they made dinner. I was in the next room, reading. "They've got the truck booked for Saturday morning. They'll get here around noon." Saturday. He looked over his shoulder at me and raised his voice slightly. "Tom, we'll need to talk about your room setup later this week, okay?" I folded my newspaper. "We'll see," I said. He smiled, like he was humoring me. "We will," he said. "Sooner than you think." I slept at my new house that night. It still smelled like fresh paint and cardboard boxes. I lay there in a strange bed, unfamiliar ceiling above me, heart thumping with a mix of fear and relief. Saturday came. Around 11:30 a.m., I parked my car a little way down the street from my old house. The new owners had asked me to stop by around noon to pick up a couple of forwarded letters and a package that had arrived with my name on it. As I sat there in the car, I saw the moving truck turn onto the street. A big rental, filled to the brim. Behind it, Eric's SUV with Laura and the kids inside. Another car I recognized from photos. His parents, George and Helen. They all pulled up in front of the house like an invading army. Eric hopped out, hands on his hips, grinning at the sight of the driveway. And then he froze. Because right there on the front lawn, in bright red letters, was a big "Sold" sign. His head snapped toward the front door. The new owners had already changed the locks. A wreath hung on the door, one I'd never seen. A couple of flower pots sat on the porch. Their cars were in the driveway. Eric marched up the walkway, his face already turning red. He rang the doorbell 3 times in quick succession. I could practically feel the anger from my car. The woman who had bought the house opened the door. Her husband stood behind her. "Yes?" she asked politely. "What are you doing in my house?" Eric demanded. The woman blinked. "Excuse me? This is my house," he said louder now, arm flinging out toward the lawn. "My family's house. What are you doing here? Why is there a sign that says sold? Where's Thomas?" The woman's husband stepped forward, holding a folder. "We bought this property from Thomas last week," he said evenly. "We have the deed and all the closing documents. You must be Eric." Eric's mouth opened and closed. "That's impossible. He lives here. We live here. My parents are moving in today." "I'm sorry," the man said, not sounding sorry at all. "But as of last Friday, this house belongs to us. We were told Thomas's family was staying with him temporarily and that he'd be letting you know about his plans." I watched from my car as Laura's face went from confusion to panic. The kids stood on the lawn, wide-eyed, clutching their backpacks. George and Helen lingered by the truck, looking lost. Laura finally found her voice. "Where is my father?" she asked, her eyes scanning the street like I might step out from behind a tree. "He said he might stop by today to pick up a package," the woman said. "But he lives somewhere else now. We have his forwarding address." Eric spun around, his face almost purple. "He can't do this," he shouted. "He can't just sell the house out from under us. My parents sold their home. We're supposed to move in. This is our home." The new owner raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure what arrangements you thought you had, but legally, this is our house. If you don't leave, we'll have to call the police." I got out of my car then and started walking up the sidewalk. Laura saw me first. "Dad?" she called, voice shaking. All heads turned. Eric strode toward me like a storm. "What have you done?" he hissed. "What did you do, you selfish old man?" I stopped at a safe distance, holding my car keys in one hand, my lawyer's business card in the other, just in case. "I sold my house," I said calmly. "The one in my name, the one I paid for, the one you were planning to carve up on some spreadsheet." "You blindsided us," he spat. "You threw your own daughter and grandchildren into the street." "No," I said quietly. "I removed myself from a situation where my son-in-law was planning, behind my back, to put my house in his and his parents' names, and then move me into an assisted living facility for my own good." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "That's not true," she said automatically. "Eric never—" I looked straight at Eric. "Do you want me to play the recording?" I asked. He froze. Because I hadn't mentioned that, after I overheard him, I'd turned on the voice recorder on my phone during one of his follow-up video calls about ownership structure and leverage. "Or," I continued, keeping my voice even, "we can skip that, and you can admit what you were doing." His mouth tightened. "You're confused," he said. "You're making up stories. He's making this up, Laura. He's not well." I shrugged. "My lawyer and my doctor both say otherwise. They've documented it. Just in case." George and Helen looked like their world had tilted. Helen spoke up, voice trembling. "Eric, what is he talking about?" Eric snapped at her without looking. "Mom, stay out of it." Laura was shaking now. "Dad, why didn't you talk to me?" "I tried," I said. "You told me I was overreacting, that I didn't understand finances, that Eric just wanted to make things easier." The kids stood near the sidewalk now, holding on to each other. My grandson looked from his father to me, confused and scared. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "where are we going to live now?" That one hurt, right in the center of my chest. I knelt down to his eye level. "You are going to live wherever your parents decide," I said, "but you will always have a place in my life. And someday, when you're older, there will be something set aside for you, something no one can take." He didn't understand, not yet, but that was okay. Eric finally realized he wasn't going to win this argument on the sidewalk. He stepped close enough that I could smell his cologne. "You're going to regret this," he whispered. "You think you've won, but you haven't. You've just turned your daughter against you." I met his eyes. "I didn't turn anyone," I said. "I just stopped letting you turn my life into one of your optimization projects." He stormed back to the group, pulled out his phone, and started pacing, yelling into it, probably at some lawyer friend, maybe at his real estate agent, I don't know. The scene ended with the moving truck pulling away, Laura crying in the passenger seat, George and Helen staring out the window, stunned. The kids waved weakly at me as they drove past. I stood alone on the sidewalk in front of a house that wasn't mine anymore, feeling both empty and lighter than I had in months. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Laura. Her name on the screen made my chest tighten. I answered. Before I could say anything, Eric's voice exploded through the speaker. "You petty, selfish old man," he shouted. "You've ruined our lives. You've thrown your grandchildren out on the street. You think you're some big hero, but you're just a cruel, bitter—" I hung up. He called again. I let it go to voicemail. Then Laura called from her own phone. I picked up. "Dad," she sobbed, "how could you do this without telling me?" "I tried to talk to you," I said quietly. "You chose not to listen. You chose to let Eric plan my future without me." "We're scrambling for a rental now," she said. "My in-laws are staying in a motel. Eric is furious. The kids are confused. You could have at least told me." "If I had," I said, "what do you think Eric would have done? He would have tried to stop me. Manipulated you. Maybe claimed I wasn't mentally competent. Maybe dragged me into court to try to force a guardianship or push me into a facility. I'm not giving him that chance." "You're my father," she said. "You're supposed to help us." "I did," I said. "For years. I opened my home. I watched your kids. I paid bills. I stayed out of your marriage. And your husband repaid me by scheming to take my house and shove me into a home. I won't finance my own eviction." There was a long silence. "You're punishing me for his choices," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself. And I'm protecting your children's future. I set up a trust for them. They'll be okay. You might not see it that way now, but someday you might be glad I did." She cried harder. "Eric says you'll regret this when you're old and alone." "I'm already old," I said. "The alone part? That depends on you. My door is open if you want to visit me. Eric's is not." She hung up. For a while after that, the story around town was that I was a monster. One of my old neighbors called to check on me and then gently said, "Eric told us you sold the house out from under them. He says he tried to help you and that you've gone, strange." I told him there was more to the story, but I didn't ask him to pick sides. People believe what they want. Meanwhile, I settled into my new house. It's small, but it's mine. No one tells me which room I can sleep in. No one hovers behind me while I write checks. I can leave a coffee mug on the counter without a lecture about optimizing kitchen space. I put my wife's photo on the mantel. I planted a little rose bush out front. I started having coffee twice a week with an old friend who lives 10 minutes away. When my knees hurt, I sit. When I'm tired, I nap in whatever room I like. I rewrote my will. Everything I have, retirement savings, sale proceeds, this new house, will go into that same trust for the grandkids when I'm gone. The trust has strict rules. Eric can't touch it. He can't manage it. He can't borrow against it. If Laura wants to access it for the kids' education or emergencies, there are hoops she'll need to jump through with a neutral trustee. A few weeks after the big blow-up, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a lawyer. Not mine. Eric's. He tried to sound intimidating, asking if I'd been coerced into selling, if I understood the documents I signed, if I'd been evaluated for capacity. I calmly gave him my lawyer's contact info and told him any further questions could go through him. That was the last I heard from that particular lawyer. The real twist came about 2 months after I moved. Laura showed up at my door. No call, no heads up. I opened the door and there she was, looking older than her 38 years, dark circles under her eyes. "Hi, Dad," she said. I stepped aside. "Come in." She looked around my little living room, taking in the second-hand couch, the potted plant by the window, the photos on the wall. "It's smaller," she said. "It's mine," I replied. She sat down and smoothed her hands over her jeans. For a minute she didn't speak. Then she took a deep breath. "I went through Eric's emails," she said quietly. "We had a fight about the rent at the place we found. I told him I was sick of not understanding what was going on with our money. He left his laptop open when he went to cool off, and I read them." She swallowed. I saw the messages with the lawyer, the spreadsheets, the notes, the line where he wrote, "Move Tom into a facility once parents are settled." She looked up at me, eyes shining with tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad." I didn't say I told you so. I didn't ask why she hadn't believed me before. I just sat there, listening. "He admitted it," she went on, voice breaking. He tried to spin it as just planning and just in case. But the way he wrote about you, the way he talked about the house, it was like you were already gone. I nodded. And then, she said, I talked to your lawyer. I told him who I was. He didn't give me details he couldn't, but he confirmed something, that you'd come to him before anything happened, that you were clear, thoughtful, and that you were worried. He said you didn't make that decision lightly. She wiped her eyes. Eric has been telling everyone you're crazy, she said. But you're not. You were the only one who saw what was happening. We sat in silence for a while. Where are you living now? I asked. In a rental across town, she said. Smaller than your old house. The kids share a room, and Eric's parents are in a little apartment nearby. They're not happy with him. They thought they were moving into a big house with us. Now they're paying rent again. Are you okay? I asked. She shrugged. Financially? Tight. Emotionally? Confused. I'm angry at him. I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at you sometimes too, still. I wish you hadn't had to go that far. But I also understand why you did. She looked me in the eyes. Did you really put money in a trust for the kids? Yes, I said. A chunk of the sale. They'll be looked after when they're older. But I won't let Eric treat that like a piggy bank. He'll never touch a cent. She nodded slowly. He's going to hate that. I know, I said. She gave a small, sad smile. That almost makes me feel better. We talked for a long time that day. Not everything was forgiven. Wounds like that don't heal overnight. But a bridge formed that hadn't been there before. Meanwhile, from what neighbors tell me, Eric is still telling his version of events. The crazy old man sold the house behind our backs and abandoned us, he says at barbecues and school events, after everything we did for him. He leaves out the part where he tried to put me into an institution so he could share my house with his parents. I can't control what he tells people. I can only control what I did and why. Which brings me back to why I'm here, typing this on a laptop my granddaughter helped me set up, asking strangers on the internet for their take. Here's how I see it. I opened my home to my daughter and her family out of love. My son-in-law saw my house as an asset to be optimized, not a home I'd built with my wife. He made concrete plans to move his parents in, change the deed, and eventually move me into assisted living to get me out of the way. When I raised concerns, I was treated like a senile old man who doesn't understand finances. So I used the one bit of power I still fully controlled, the deed with my name on it. I sold the house quietly, moved into a smaller place I can actually control, and secured my money where he can't reach it while still providing for my grandkids' future. Now my daughter says I was cruel for selling the house and running away instead of talking it out. But when I tried to talk, they dismissed me. So here it is, just like I'd write it as a post. Now I live in a smaller place that I actually control. My money is protected, and my son-in-law finally has to act like an adult and pay rent, instead of planning how to steal my house on paper. My family says I was cruel for selling the house and running away instead of talking it out. But when I tried to talk, they treated me like a senile old man who doesn't understand finances. Do you think I went too far by selling the house and disappearing? What would you have done in my place?
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.